It's my pleasure to be here. This talk is a joint work with Mohanendra Sidha, a student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Biologists have been saying that there has been about 100,000 years ago a mitochondrial Eve, who is an ancestor, the maternal line of all human beings. And at the same time, a recent paper by Miyagawa and others showed that human beings could speak some language even 135,000 years before. Therefore, by the time of mitochondrial Eve, humanity could speak some language. And only a few thousand human beings lived in Eastern Africa at that time, so they must have had a single language. So if this is the case, then why is it said that we are, human beings, speaking today unrelated languages, which are classified by linguists into hundreds of different language families? The estimates range from about 1,500 to almost 500 different language families that are not related to each other, according to traditional linguists. Now this motivates us to look for a single superfamily of languages. And that means trying to unify all of different language families into a superfamily. This map shows here by colors some of the major language families, including in green, the Indo-European language family, in darker green, Uralic language family, and then Turkic and so on, of Afro-Asiatic in orange and so on. Are these all related in some way? Is there an ancient superfamily that connected all of these? This is what we try to find out. Now let me introduce to you the basic ideas in linguistics that we are going to use, and the basic unit of pronunciations are phonemes, and there are different classifications for phonemes. So vowels and consonants are basic division, but consonants are also divided into labials, and according to the place of pronunciation, this is produced by the lips, include the sounds B, M, P, W, and so on. Labial dentals just produce a little bit backward, involving the teeth and the mouth. Dentals, alveolars, and so on, so all the way to glottal sounds, which are produced by the throat. Another way of looking at these phonemes is by looking at the manner of pronunciation. For example, nasal phonemes are pronounced by means of the air traveling through both the nasal cavity and the mouth. And these nasal consonants commonly include N, M, and plosive is another group, and these are produced when there is a complete closure during the production of the sound. So somehow the sound is excluding, okay? These include B, D, G, K, P, T, commonly in languages. Many sounds come in pairs, voiced, unvoiced pairs. And these are illustrated here. D and T are voiced and unvoiced pairs, and so are G and K. And there are other types, as you see here. Now, the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is commonly used to describe the words in languages all over the world, provides us a table. So you have the rows showing the manner of pronunciation, and the columns showing the place of pronunciation. And the International Phonetic Alphabet uses many of the same consonant notations as the English alphabet, so there's a lot of overlap, so it's easier to learn for us. And a few extra notations are used which are new, and you see a few of those notations at the bottom of this slide. And some of these are also difficult to type, and more common notations are with this alternative notation shown on the right for the sounds of sh and sh. Now, all of these sounds can be grouped together into so-called congruent sound groups. What does that mean? The grouping here is intended to denote those sounds that can change to one another over time in languages. So it's a frequent change to change a p to a b, because these are voiced unvoiced pairs. And sometimes the b can change to an m. There are many examples of these changes. And so the M can also sometimes change to N. So these form a group, the first congruent sound group. The second one, the DT and th, is again a group, and these also can change to each other, and so on the other groups. Altogether, 7 groups are shown here, and these 7 groups are the most frequently observed sound changes, no matter what language families they look at, or languages they look at in their history. So this is what is intended to be captured by this concept. Another very important concept is the Swadesh list. Maurice Swadesh was an important American linguist who in the 1950s developed a method based on Swadesh lists to compare languages. And he started with the idea that there are certain universal concepts that every language has. These include the pronouns, as you see here in the slide, and include, in fact, 210 basic concepts according to his list. And they can list all of these in a row, the same concept, and then compare the languages where there are similarities and where are not. And without a priori knowledge about language families, you can kind of discover which languages are related and can be put together into a language family. So, for example, these concepts of water, earth, mountain, and sky that you see here, in the various Indo-European languages tend to have similar names, similar words for them, showing that the Indo-European languages form a language family. The list goes on, as I've said, and includes concepts like rain, river, lake, and sea. And people have accepted these Swadesh lists as a basic for a lot of follow-up work, and it has become extremely popular and important in linguistics for comparative linguistics. Now, how do you go backward in time to superfamilies, okay? Because after an exhaustive use of Swadesh lists, we ended up with still hundreds of languages that nobody can connect based on traditional techniques like the Swadesh list. But we would like to go deeper. So one key observation that we made is that the universal concepts are not constant. So if we imagine an earlier stage of language, superfamily stage, then that stage had a different set of universal concepts that people agreed are fundamental and need a word for their own. And other concepts, such as rain, river, and lake, can be expressed based on a combination of words for water, earth, sky, and mountain. So if we have already water, earth, sky, and mountain, rain could be expressed by the combination word sky water. A river could be expressed as mountain water, and lake as earth water. That means that at the superfamily stage, we do not need separate words for rain, river, and lake. These are actually not universal concepts at the superfamily level. Now, these got names later at the language family level. There is also another observation, which is the observation of possible semantic change. Mm-hmm. Suppose that in a superfamily we have some word X for mountain, Y for water, then the combination word XY simply would mean river. Now imagine people living in the mountains, whose basic source of water is a river. Then over time, river and water becomes synonymous, and they can be exchanged. So essentially, Y starts to be meaning river. The mountain is recognized to be superfluous because you always have this kind of water and not other kind of water. So mountain is dropped for the compounder. And you could end up actually with Y meaning river instead of water as originally meant. Similar changes could happen for people who live near a lake. X is earth and Y is water. Then it could end up Y meaning over time lake as being synonymous, the only source of water for people living next to a lake like this. And finally, the same thing could happen if you are living in an area, maybe in the tropics, that rain is almost an everyday occurrence, and that is the basic source for water for those people. So then the same process could happen, and Y, which originally meant water, will end up meaning rain in their language. So in summary, what we observe is that the superfamily word for water ended up as being the name for river, lake, and rain in the various successive languages. And so, water is by no means a universal category that cannot be changed, and this river, lake, and rain could be changed into each other, and they have to be much more flexible than the Swadesh list and table allows us to be. And so, we looked at how we can use this idea, okay? We have looked at what could be truly fundamental concepts, universal concepts, at the superfamily level. And we also see that various people all over the world identified 4 basic elements in the past. So among the Greeks, the philosopher in the 5th century BC, Empedocles, talked about air, earth, fire, and water being the 4 basic elements, from which everything else was composed. The same idea occurs in India, Tibet, and African cultures. So it must have been a very ancient, very well-spread idea that we have these 4 elements. So these are truly universal concepts. Therefore, we looked at all words related to these from 7 different languages, and we allowed just a category for these 7 languages. The categories were these 4. As you see in this table, we have 7 different languages, and the first column is the IPA notation. The second is the language, where it occurs. The third one is the language family, so you see 4 different language families. The next column is the meaning in English, and the last one is just the category. And we allow the categories to be matching up. Okay, so not exactly has to mean river in both languages, but it could be any kind of water. Much more flexible than the Swadesh list approach. When we do this, then we can further group all of these words in our dictionary into a table. This table helps the analysis of these words. The idea is that each word is placed into an entry in this matrix, where the first row placement, is according to the first consonant, and the column placement is according to the second consonant that occurs in that word. We place high emphasis on the first 2 consonants because sometimes anything further would be some sort of suffix in these words. Okay, so endings could change of words very much more frequently than the beginning. Furthermore, once we start to see groupings emerging, then we created a hypothetical protoword for them. These hypothetical words are indicated by a star. And you see, we have 7 different groups. As an example, the Samudra group, where in Sanskrit, Samudra means ocean or sea, and in Japanese, Samudra means heavy rain in the summer, early summer. So rain and sea are connected in that group, Samudra group. Here's another table where different language families are shown and how they are related to each other according to these words. And you see that there are many words that connect the 4 different language families. So, for example, the Indo-European and the Japonic language family are connected with the word Samudra, but also Agni. Okay, so there are several connections usually for these language families. So even though we have looked at only 4 categories which we identified as likely to be universal concepts at the superfamily level, we already found many connections. Mm-hmm. A natural way to go forward is to try to find even more truly universal concepts at that level of superfamilies, and also involve more languages. Okay, so there's a lot of work to look at all of this, but I think this is very exciting because we have started to see connections among language families, whereas we have been told that, everybody was told that there's basically futile to look for these connections. Only a very minority of linguists look for superfamilies, and they are kind of looked at very skeptically by many traditional linguists, to say the least. Okay. So I think this is a new method that we presented, a new data mining method that can be further used to actually study this problem, and hopefully we'll be able to include a lot of languages in the world, starting from Eurasian languages to be in one superfamily. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be back to answer questions.
Thank you for a very nice talk. I have a question though. So it's actually interesting to see connection among, words through sound. So I'm also wondering whether the same concept could also be applied to signs from scripts. So for example, I'm thinking about like the aleph, that in Phoenician was just like a consonant, and then for example in Greek it became a vowel, for example. So could also this same mechanism could also be applied to written words?
The study of sign scripts can be done somewhat similarly, but you don't have obviously the use of the concept of congruent sound groups and things like that. But you have certain other kind of groupings of the signs, and you can see various signs from various scripts fit together. Probably they have a common origin. So in some sense, you can do the same type of analysis, and in fact we have some interest in looking at how writing spreads throughout the world. But when we are talking about languages, we are talking about a time scale much earlier. So we are talking about going back hundreds, thousands of years, whereas writing started about 5,000 years. So the scale is very, very different.
Yeah, so I have another question though, I think. So the question is, would it also be possible to include cliques? Because for example, I'm thinking that some languages in Africa are also using cliques. Are there any connections, for example, in how to cliques converted that into consonants or anything of the sort?
Obviously, there are many phonemes which are not included in our table. We only included those phonemes which occur in the 7 languages that we studied. If we have a larger set of languages, then we will need to extend either the congruent sound groups with new members, or add a new congruent sound group itself. So maybe the click sounds, which are very different, in my opinion, from the other 7, would form an ACE group. And certainly we will be able to add more sound groups as needed to study the languages in Africa as well.
Mostly about the, when you say that the families sort of join together the X and Y components of a word, so like river, for example, is based on like geographical instances, like people who live in mountains will combine mountain and water, and that's the same as river, right? Are there any other elements, not just geographical, that cause these sort of fusions of the words, sort of maybe events or things like that?
Yes, there could be some other groupings. We have some instances where female animals, for example, some kind of deer, have the same name in Sami languages as female animals like bison in other places. So maybe you have some categories there, female grazing animals or something like that. We can look for these things, definitely. Also names of birds. We have seen some crossing of the names of birds. Definitely people didn't have a specific names for every species as we have today, but they were recognizing some differences among this category of birds, that category of birds, and this category of animals, and that. This needs to be investigated, what was really possibly in the mind of variation people. So we don't know yet, this needs to be discovered, but these are kind of the things that we would like to explore next.